Hi, I'm Arthur, and this is part 15 in a 20-part series I am doing covering the All-Stars chapters of Space Marines. The best of the best, the ones you need to know about, though likely, considering you're already watching this video, you know about them. Do you need to have seen the other parts to understand this one? Nah, not really. Pick and choose as you see fit, but it would make me happy if you did. When you read 40k, you become jaded, cynical even. You become especially annoyed at various ideas, including but not limited to the overuse of Space Marines, the overuse of Latin when simpler phrases would suffice, the overuse of the phrase inky blackness to describe things. No, seriously, I'm a fan who loves me some prose, but why is it that at least once per book I've ever read for anything that's from the Black Library, that phrase is used to describe how dark it is outside? It's weird, I don't know why. Above all else, the one thing you learn to hate about the setting, or at least something that you will eventually become understandably jaded about, would be the overwhelming bureaucracy that was in the setting pre-8th edition. A lot of modern day stuff has been progressed due to the main people of the setting pushing to add new stories of battle as the main focus. Back in the day, the main driving point of the 40k setting was to talk about how shitty it would be if there was so much red tape for no reason other than A, the charts said we do this instead, or B, well, I would be mildly inconvenienced and I am of a higher social standard than you. It basically led to the whole setting being stagnant, and that's the whole point. The whole point of 40k in the past was that it was a setting that stories happened in to a certain date and no past. Not a grand sweeping narrative that progresses and all that with side stories. But me bitching aside, why bring up bureaucracy? What does that have to do with Space Marines? Brother or sister, but most likely brother. Look at the title of the video. So, the Astral Claws are a fun chapter of Marines to discuss, as they have a hell of a tenure. See, we are technically going to be talking about 3 chapters of Marines today, all of them related to, or at least a part of, the Astral Claws. Okay, well, 2 chapters and 1 warband, but the Astral Claws are kind of the first one, as they eventually become the pirates we know and love. But before we get into that inevitable fall down to scurvy, let's get some editors paid and some bank made. With my knee kind of being forever borked after last year's kickboxing and housefire incident, I have now adopted a new workout regimen that I am slowly adapting to, and it's basically work out every single muscle above my hips, and that's it. So while my lower half withers and I begin to resemble some kind of paper white bearded cosplay of the genie from Aladdin, something that genuinely helps, no joke, is actually Gamer Supps, but specifically their creatine drink mix. Gamerade. Drink that back for my post-workout shake, and I'm more or less set to sit back and read another book about gosh darn Space Marines. And my work is never done and all that. Creatine has numerous different health benefits even outside of the gym, with a lot of science indicating that it does actually improve cognition in your brain. It's pretty cool. At least it points that direction. Coming in now 3 flavors, with the introduction of, ironically enough, Queso's Nuclear Bombsicle as a drink, which, might I add, is pretty good. So use my code as per the usual. You know the routine. You know how it goes, right? You are listening, right? Not just speaking into the void here and trying to sell tasty energy juice mixes at an affordable price, right? Right? Use code BONEZONE at checkout for 10% off all purchases from the site, and also help out the channel. Special thanks to Gamer Supps for supporting me in my endeavors. And let's drift away from existential dread and get back to Warhammer, yeah! So, the story of the Astral Claws is one of overwhelming competency, but a certain lack of humility. See, when you are so good at something, that something being, speedy murder in a society that really praises vehicular-based murder, then you tend to speed up through the ranks. The Astral Claws are the perfect example of that, resembling the Celestial Lions if they had won silver medals instead of gold. The Astral Claws have a tenure that, if you ignore their their record being mostly expunged for the sake of everybody's sanity, is probably one of the most impressive careers in the short run of a 40k chapter in history. For context, they were so good as a fleet-based chapter that, one, they were put as the leader of a bunch of other kind of important chapter marines, some being second and or third founding, to which, if they were also in charge of one of the most dangerous locations in 40k, the Maelstrom, with them being from a founding that has a double digit to it. That shit is kind of cool. Two, they were put on a 1,000-year plus penitent crusade for a fuck-up that wasn't really that big of a deal, but whatever. And not only did they oblige happily, they actually came back at full strength ready to serve. And three, they were so trusted that they allegedly had 3 successor chapters raised from their genetic stock and their ranks, of which we only know 1 for sure, but the others we can kind of speculate, because if they have a cat aesthetic, it's probably from them. So, with that all being said, I'm being a little bit vague, talking in the simplest terms, and, bringing shit up to kind of, make it easier for me to get my foot in the door. Hey, how you been? Been a minute, guys. A full week. How you doing? I'm here. I'm in your house. You don't I don't know where this bit's going. I'm in a good mood today. Leave me alone. And also, your printer needs more ink. In the simplest terms, in their heyday, the Astral Claws were a chapter hailing from the 10th founding of Marines that were kind of created to shear up the borders of the Imperium. Basically, the lines were not being maintained, and in order to create, more divisible lines of where taxation is supposed to be, who's in charge of what, and so on, they had to make a couple chapters to do that, and thus the 10th founding, or at least that's what we assume they were there for. And to their credit, the Astral Claws did this job with gusto, most likely coming from the lineage of Guilliman or the Lion, because the Astral Claws are incredibly well-mannered, but also focused with the practices of governing, but also very not good at picking up on the, tone of a room. The Astral Claws were incredibly stable in terms of gene seed and temperament for a while, with an eye for practicality, but a lack of understanding as to why practicality in this very impractical universe may be looked down upon. You could kind of see why Guilliman or the Lion are the best choices here. Though, we'll get to what I mean with them not understanding why in a little bit. Calm the fuck down. They were weirdly hyper-focused on being the bestest Space Marines to ever Space Marines. So, as we know, Space Marines are shock assault-style troops of the highest order. Thus, they are meant to go in and respond as an assault force faster than you could defend as someone on the receiving end of their assault. As they were initially a fleet-based chapter, they had worked to master this tactic, hitting them hard, fast, and in great numbers, and making sure that if they had to retreat, the damage that they had induced wouldn't be easily recoverable. This also led to them having what is widely considered the best non-White Scars successor bikers in the setting. Weird, right? They served with distinction is the short end here, but there was always this air of hubris to them that was incredibly hard to ignore most of the time. Essentially, though they did see themselves as the defenders of humanity, they didn't see themselves as the defenders of humans. They were trees for the forest type. A single tree doesn't really matter in regards to the forest, so why should we care if it gets cut down? So this led to them having, at first, a bit of a mildly cold opinion of humanity that would steadily devolve into a callous disregard for human life. Man, take a shot every time someone in 40k started off as good boy who would never hurt a fly and then turned into a frenzy McMurder kill because the Imperium basically made more enemies than they needed to that day. Not exactly a good thing, but at the time, the Imperium did reward them for their efforts, so it wasn't all bad all the time. After their penitent crusade, they were seen as being so successful that they were given a planet to declare their own fiefdom, or fiefdom. I still don't know which way to pronounce it. The planet that went by the lovely name of Badab Primaris, and they were the basic leader of this small section known as Badab. It's complicated, but basically the Badab sector of the universe, I guess, was this place that contained the Maelstrom. The Maelstrom was a tinier version of the Eye of Terror, not exactly something that was incredibly violent and spewing demons out, but it was steadily corrupting things that were near it, and a lot of Xenos, aliens, and Chaos worshippers had found refuge in it, because weirdly enough, unlike the Eye of Terror, it was kind of stable and a little bit predictable, so there was that. So the Astral Claws were appointed the head of of this group of individuals known as the Maelstrom Warders, who were in charge of making sure that the Maelstrom was warded against everything getting out of it, as it was a very dangerous, unmonitored section. Now also, side note here, I have no idea why every other YouTuber under the sun who talks about them calls them the Maelstrom Wardens, because now that's an R. That's at least how I've been reading it. Maybe I'm just having a dyslexia again, but yeah, the Maelstrom Warders was a faction of several rather important and recognizable chapters that we will discuss at length in the next section. And speaking of, let's call this next section Arthur hastily and poorly explains the Badab War in probably 10 minutes or less. Yeah, I'm gonna mess this up, so yeah, let's try this by naming off the chapters that were part of the Maelstrom Warders and giving a cute little description of them. So the members of the Maelstrom Warders include the Astral Claws, see above, the Charnel Guard, a second or third founding chapter, we're not 100% certain, of Blood Angel's heritage, known for their founding member being a dude reduced to a nugget with no arms and no legs and refusing to be put into a dreadnought, became a bit of a flying berserker during the Horus Heresy, also with extreme depression, so this obviously translates to them as a chapter having an uncomfortable amount of Horus Heresy era tanks. Yeah, the Lamenters. Fucking yikes. The Mantis Warriors, one of my favorite successor chapters, as they are basically the White Scar's equivalent of the Raven Guard if they also really liked bugs. These dudes were kind of bound together by virtue of them being tasked with watching over the Maelstrom. There are a few more key players here, with the Executioners swearing a blood debt to the Astral Claws due to a service they had done to them in the past. The Executioners are a pretty fun chapter. They're kind of in a similar line to the Charnel Guard. They have a decent tenure from being a third founding chapter. The only problem is their paint scheme is so dull. It's so goddamn dull and almost lifeless in a way. It's just not as iconic as it could be. It's hard to describe it. It just doesn't pop like other schemes from those early second and third founding chapters. But I am getting distracted by the fact that their progenitor is the literal Chad meme known as Fafnir Ran. Over the course of a decade, the Astral Claws were basically dicked around by the Imperium, taking resources away from them and expecting them to do the same job, focusing on maintaining order amongst the unrulies rather than solving a problem permanently. Like, theoretically, with the right resources, the Imperium of Man could keep the Maelstrom under lock and key damn near forever. Maybe not seal it off, because I don't know if we have that kind of, that's more of a Necron thing, I guess, but make it so that there really isn't anything in there that could pose a threat, with key locations locked in with the right guardsmen regiments and maybe a Space Marine chapter a little bit closer to the Maelstrom. It basically would be the key of conquering those locations rather than, just stopping anything that comes a little bit too close to the borders from getting past it. But as much as the current chapter master, well, at least at the time, said, the Council of Terror just ignored that and kind of met him with a resounding womp womp. So they decided to take things into their own hands. See, they wanted to end this duty so they could help the rest of the Imperium. They wanted to be a resource that was used, not just a defender who was there to stop anything evil that would come out. So what happened is they did a lot of stuff that, caused a lot of discomfort to a lot of people. They started a taxed blockade that made it so that if you use the Badab sector as a trade route, all the resources would have to go to Badab Primaris, or at least a tithe of them would, and any kind of tithes that would pass through would go to Badab Primaris as well. They also stopped giving their own gene seed tithes to the Council of Terra, which is kind of a big no-no for chapters. See, the Imperium can look past a lot, but one of the only ways they can exert any level of control over a Space Marine chapter is by this specific tithe. It's the only way to keep track of them and make sure that they're not, going against the laws that have been set across. It's the only real way to keep track of them and make sure that they're not breaking any of the Imperium's laws. It's just the one law that they have to obey. So not sending it is a very quick way for you to get denounced as a renegade and also likely get a Minotaur or two done about you. So the Maelstrom Warders and the Executioners were allying with them as they had sworn fealty to the Astral Claws, who were basically citing that there is a precedent for them to basically just secede from their imperial duties, but not secede from the Imperium as a whole. So the Articles of Just Succession was kind of the thing where they were basically swearing that they would defend the Imperium, but they were, not subjected to its laws anymore. Yeah, I swear this thing could have probably been, not done if the Council of Terra said, yeah, sure, solve this problem that we've asked you to solve, but nah, I guess not anymore. This all kind of came to a head and made things even more suspicious when early on a successor chapter of the Astral Claws, as I mentioned, there were 3 of them. This is the only one that we know about for sure. The Tiger Claws appeared from being lost in the warp, and also they were denied assistance from the High Lords due to them possibly being corrupted. Now, there is a lot of speculation that the Tiger Claws were affected by chaos to some degree, to which there is a degree of merit to. But I think the better way to see it is they were bitter and fuck-ass mad at the Imperium, which probably did not help considering the Astral Claws most of the time were already about to cross that line. So the Tiger Claws were absorbed into the Astral Claws, and they were also beginning to swell their ranks because they weren't giving out their gene seed tithes. If the Imperium wasn't going to give them the resources they needed to seal the Maelstrom, they were going to produce them themselves. See, their planet, Badab Primaris, had one of the best manufactorums of mediocre goods in the setting, which may sound like damning with feigned praise, but genuinely they could make things like rhinos and okay patterns of power armor and bolt guns relatively easily. Now, there wasn't anything specialized or super good, like you weren't going to get any like high-end land raiders, but everybody was going to be equipped. Even the weird regiment that they erected across the entirety of this, known as the Tyrant's Legion. Now, Tyrant's Legion, we're going to talk about that more when we get into the whole Red Corsairs arc, but basically think of them as a planetary defense force that was raised to just slightly above where they normally are, so that they could basically function as a guardsman regiment that was led by Space Marine commanders, which is, unless your name is the Mentors, that's kind of illegal, but whatever. So, you have a demi-legion of Space Marines that is swelling due to the Astral Claws just rapid producing Marines, High Lords not getting their tithes, Chapter Master Huron genuinely planning to just close the Maelstrom at current times, and that's it. So, something had to give. The nearby nobles with the authority of the Imperium decided it was time to make their stand, not realizing that, the fuck around and find out principles were kind of reaching critical mass here. They attempted to breach the blockade that the Astral Claws had created, leading to them getting absolutely just slaughtered, just getting the brakes beaten off of them, thus sparking the Badab War properly. Part I loved about the Badab War is that if the more reasonable chapters of Marines had shown up in greater numbers, this could all have been avoided with a very pleasant conversation, but nah, dude, we got like the first responding chapter being the Firehawks, known for being some of the most petulant assholes. Then you have the Minotaurs, known for being the most petulant assholes in the setting. The Carcharodons, who are known for being if an entire chapter of Skinamarink demons had chain axes and hate in their heart. The Marines Errant. Okay, the Marines Errant are kind of chill, but you get my point. With stuff like the Star Phantoms showing up, who just want to kill things and wipe them out into piles of inert ash on the ground, they were just going to murder fuck their way to the capital of the Astral Claws and do so until everything was dead. The Imperium doing their best to send more and more resources to it seems a little bit hypocritical, considering if you just sent that same level of resource to helping Huron, he wouldn't have had to swell his ranks, but what do I know, man? If there's one thing I can't recognize, it's hypocrisy. So, through a shitload of attrition, some amazing plans, and a bunch of horrors beyond the reckoning of most of the setting, no, really, seriously, we're going to talk about that during the Red Corsairs section. You'll hear about the Corpse Taker Apothecary soon enough. Quite a fan of their concept. The castle that Huron had kind of put himself into was breached, his forces divided, and if you didn't pick up on it, the Astral Claws are masters of something that we call scaring the hoes, where they basically scared away a bunch of their allies by committing war crimes that even the regular, most war crimey divisions of Space Marines wouldn't do. So, with the Star Phantoms breaking into Huron's house and did a melta about him and blew up half of his body, this is kind of where everything got a little bit fucked up beyond repair. Much like with Conquest from Invincible, you really gotta make sure that he's dead before moving on. Sure, most of his body was incinerated by a melta-blast, but in fact, Huron did not die and survived literally just because of his undying hatred, so petulant and just intense that most Khorne worshippers would be a a little bit jealous, and through this act was able to be revived. Thanks mostly to a team of apothecaries working around the clock for probably about a week or two, and a bunch of weirdos who had conducted some degree of psychic ritual. Yeah, he was brought back, and to his degree was a being of true and honest, pure fucking hate. He lived and is now known as one of the biggest pimps in the universe, Huron Blackheart, and using the modified version of the Tyrant's Claw symbol that he used towards the end of the Badab War instead of the Lion's Sigil that his chapter was using. He remodified that a little bit more, changed the paint scheme of the Astral Claws, and the Red Corsairs were born, now taking roost in the middle of the Maelstrom, where they know that people won't really travel because the Imperium won't let them there. So, yeah, let's talk about what is likely considered one of the top 5 threats in the universe at current times, and that's the Red Corsairs, now that we're there. The Red Corsairs are such a fun, but I guess kind of odd faction. They are kind of just a meme. As someone who enjoys himself a nice meme, it can be a bit discouraging to play a faction that has a joke kind of baked into its genetics. Because I mean, like, what if I told you that the logo for the Salamanders was kind of a deep cover reference to the logo for Bad Dragon? You'd be a little bit upset on some level, even if it would never make you stop playing them. Even if the reference was made eons ago, you'd still kind of be a little bit annoyed about it being a part of the chapter's creation. We gotta taint the legacy a little there. Now, what I just said was a bit of a joke, but the original creators of 40k and Warhammer as a whole did this thing every now and then, like how the Harbingers chapter of Space Marines come from a shithole planet that the light of the Emperor doesn't reach, known as Birmingham. And also, I wish a kind shut the fuck up to viewers from across the pond. I know I just said Birmingham. I speak the Queen's English just like you, and just because I decide to pronounce the H in Birmingham doesn't mean I'm any lesser than you guys. Leave me alone. But me being upset at Brits aside, the Red Corsairs were originally just a pirate meme. No, I'm not joking. I only just recently found this out. Like, Huron Blackheart is just a reference to Blackbeard. He's missing a bunch of pieces of him that need to be replaced by, augmetics, so he has a weird claw hand. Oh, that's kind of crazy. It's almost like he has a hook for a hand. Oh, and he's also missing that same leg on that same side of the body and is replaced by an augmetic. That's his peg leg. He's missing his eye as well, and it's replaced with a cybernetic that shines a dark light. Oh man, that's a great eye patch you got there, Mr. Pirate Man. And he has a little dog thing that skitters around him and perches on his shoulder like some kind of parrot. His faction is literally called the Red Corsairs, which is another word for pirate if you didn't know. I did not understand this until recently, but I feel it doesn't really rob them of their aesthetic. In fact, it kind of adds to it as long as you're in on the joke. The Red Corsairs, as one of the Chaos factions, where chaos is kind of said in air quotations, is really fun. They worship chaos, sort of, but it's not really encouraged that much, and it gives them such a different level of distinction from other factions so that they're not just the pirate one. Huron is probably kept alive by the Chaos Gods simply because it would be kind of funny, and it's often been stated that the level of hate and anger Huron feels kind of made him psychic. There's two ways of interpreting the psychic manifestations that he kind of creates, like the Hamadria, and one of them is that he is so angry and so mad all the time that the Hamadria dog things just kind of appear. It's basically he has so many issues that there is no amount of therapy or Xanax that could fix them. He leads his faction of raiders from the front or the back, whichever makes the most sense, because he's not some kind of idiot that is trying to die or seek glory. He just wants to strike back at the Imperium. Now, if you couldn't tell, he's actually in fact cosplaying Abaddon's silhouette. I believe he is incredibly dangerous, just not nearly as strong as Abaddon. Now calm down, Red Corsairs fans. That was what we call in the business a little joke. I know that the longer you spend in this kind of nexus point of being a Chaos champion, the closer you get to one hand being a weird claw thing that has a special melee function, usually a Mark III claw with a ranged attack to it, and then the other one is going to be some kind of one-handed melee weapon while also you represent the Chaos Gods. No, seriously, I genuinely look at a lot of the weird Chaos champions out there, they all just kind of drift towards that. Like, even Lucius the Eternal, from like a weird perspective, you could look at the Lash of Torment and be like, yeah, it is kind of a weird specialized close-range melee weapon that can do ranged attacks, and he does have a one-handed melee weapon with a weird backplate banner thing that, you know, injects him with drugs, but like, whatever. Also, this weird trend is also very common in Night Lords. I don't know why. The Death of Saints, Power Axe in one hand, Mark III Lightning Claw. Crazy. And I just finished the Remnant Blades like a couple months back. Same deal. Guy eventually just had a Lightning Claw in one hand and a Power Glaive in the other, which... weird. It's just surprisingly common, I guess. The Red Corsairs, much like every other self-respecting Renegade chapter, act as close to pirates as possible. They launch raids to gather supplies, and honestly, they are not above smashing up any faction, Xenos, Chaos, or Imperial. Even other Chaos factions are not safe from them, as I just said. Though that does sound a little bit like every other Chaos Warband out there. Most of them bicker and fight on a pretty high-end level, but the thing that separates the Corsairs from everybody else is the fact that they aren't just a small fish in a big pond trying to get the scraps, more like the shark that's hiding underneath waiting to tear shit to pieces in large swaths. They will appear, launch raids on anything. Space Marine fortress monasteries, Chaos battleships, Chaos war fleets even. They will launch raids on homeworlds to important dignitaries even if it would cause an Imperial backlash. They do have an okay success rate and no one really wants to fuck with them. For example, with the help of a small Night Lord strike force that they used to kind of destabilize the location, they had a very successful raid on the fortress monastery of the Marines Errant, which, if you didn't know, are one of the most impressive successors of the Ultramarines. Now, a practice that spurs them to raid fortress monasteries and those kinds of important locations kind of started in the Badab War. This is where we're gonna go back a little bit, because remember when I mentioned these things called the Corpse Taker Apothecaries? Yeah, this was a practice started by the Astral Claws chief apothecary, Garyon, because back in the day, the Astral Claws were in desperate need of soldiers, and they didn't really care what gene seed they used as long as it was stable. So the Corpse Taker's job was to find the bodies of dead Space Marines from the conflict and either steal the body, or if they had the time, extract the gene seed, regardless of what lineage it came from, bring it back to create new Astral Claws for the war effort. This practice, even from the standards of Chaos Marines, is seen as a little bit icky, but, you know, beggars can't be choosers, right? Now, this practice still exists, them trying to steal larger swaths of gene seed banks rather than just stealing corpses, but they still do that. And also, Garyon still exists, now known as the Corpse Master for this thing that he invented. He also has a model, and it looks really cool. The Red Corsairs steal whatever gene seed they can find for two reasons. One, a Space Marine is a Space Marine, and damn whoever gets annoyed by you stealing it. And two, due to their base of operations and the usual place that they plunder being so close to the center of the Maelstrom, their gene seed usually gets horribly mutated and, dare I say, unusable after a certain period of time. So Huron tends to, you know, rectify that however he sees fit. Now, I will state, Huron, even though he is not nearly as strong as Abaddon, I think the argument that's between the fan base that people think that he would be better as War Master than Abaddon does have some valid points and some that I think are not so valid. See, Huron has led the new generation of Space Marines, not Legionnaires, but Space Marine chapters, and has had great successes in the centuries that he's been doing that. Even though Abaddon has been doing this for millennia, I think that he hasn't really gained much relevance until 8th edition, and even then it cost him so much, i.e. a Blackstone Fortress. But I don't know. I feel that although Huron seems more tactically sound and able to kind of string two thoughts together that don't involve desecrating the area to promote chaos incursions, he does not have the same level of blessings from the Chaos Gods, which literally means he just doesn't have the same level of plot armor. Sure, through whatever pact he made, he got, and this is the second theory as to why he has the little parrot dog, the Hamadria, he kind of has that, and there is a personal belief here for me that the Hamadria is actually just the Chaos Gods trying to spy on him to make sure that he maintains the pact that he made to stay alive, which, yeah, Abaddon doesn't have that because they trust him to do whatever. I don't know, maybe I'm just not nearly as harsh on old Abigail as I could be, but I don't think he's doing that bad of a job most days. So to this day, the Red Corsairs, including their incredible incredibly sexually charged updated minis that just got released occupied that niche that if you know about them, you like them a lot. They are kind of that weird hipster faction that, oh, I don't like the Black Legion, I like the Red Corsairs, and everybody in the room claps their flabby little hands because they agree with you or some shit. But it's not me trying to downplay how cool they are, because they are cool, and their models look awesome. I have felt the Siren's call to get them more than once, but my heart will always belong to Nurgle and the Death Guard. But that's me. So, this was a bit of a short look into the history of the Red Corsairs. I do plan to cover them a little bit more in depth in a Badab War video at some point, because that is kind of a rite of passage, I guess, for YouTubers at this point, but I do have a different idea of covering it than other people have. But what do you all think about the Red Corsairs? Do you feel they are worth the hype, or do you think that they are poop from a butt? Let me know in the comments down below, because I actually like the discussion these guys promote. It's literally like the same discussion that happens whenever people discuss the merits of the Salamanders, if they're a cool faction or not, because regardless of whatever side you are on in that argument, it's just so civil for some reason. I don't get it, of all things, because like 40k is known for being pretty tempestuous and a little bit capricious at the best of times in terms of the fandom, but I don't know, just those topics just make it so that everybody's like, yes, I hate them and I think they're boring. Oh no, I understand. Nick Kime, that is quite funny. And that's genuinely how it goes, but I'm getting off track here. Special thanks to my channel members for supporting me and my team. With your help, I am able to do this for a living and enjoy myself at the same time. So, thank you all for your help. Genuinely. I know it seems like this message is a bit canned every time I write it, but no, whenever I do, I try and use it as a way to remember why I do this, and that is because I enjoy making videos, and I enjoy making people entertained. So, in a lot of ways, it's a dream come true, and it's a dream that I never thought could potentially come true, doing this. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you all. And thank you all once again for watching. And before I go, I just want to say, bro, you know what my white whale of this setting has been for some reason for like years now? Finding out what the Bargacy is. Even as far back as the fucking Iron Lords video, I was so curious. For those who don't know, the Bargacy is an alien species so dangerous that an entire chapter of Space Marines was created to exterminate it. Yeah, the Iron Lords. Because one, it's incredibly dangerous, apparently, and can kill Space Marines easily in one-on-one combat, and two, if the Tyranids got a hold of their genetic material, we would be kind of fucked. So I always fantasize that it's just some kind of weird self-modulating entity. But with the release of the Red Corsairs update, we got one who's the pet of a Tyralian dog soldier, and it's just a dingo dog thing? What the actual fuck?